Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel for another Escape from Tarkov video, this time with a bit of a guide on loadouts that you can put together using level 2 traders as you start unlocking items, and a bit of help from the flea market once you have that unlocked. For people who've been playing for quite a while, a lot of this stuff won't be new to you, but for anyone who is new to the game or returning after a bit of a break, this should serve as a nice breakdown of what is available at level 2 traders, give you some solid weapon builds for you to use, and a bit of knowledge on the armor and equipment that you can set yourself up with once you have it unlocked. In the last wipe, level 1 and 2 traders got a big buff, and that remains true now. If you have the money, you can kit yourself out pretty nicely with level 2 traders, and there's some great budget options available to you as well. As usual, I'll be checking out some weapon builds first to start this off, and then I'll look at the armor and equipment that you can run after we get through these builds. First up for the builds, we have a classic mid-game ADAR/M4 build, which I've talked about a few times before, and which now has some pretty solid competition from the SCAR L as the go-to early game 5.56 setup. To start this build off, you just need an ADAR, any ADAR. It doesn't matter if it's a busted up scav gun or factory new from Skier, since we can repair it fully by replacing the receiver. To do this, you can either buy the ADAR receiver from Skier level 1 or the M4 receiver from Mechanic level 2, which shows up as a single red item that just says M4A1 for about 20,000 rubles. And the choice here really depends on whether you want full auto or not. With the new recoil system, I've been relying on semi-auto myself, but if you want full auto for room clearing, just get the M4 receiver from Mechanic level 2 and use it in this build to turn the ADAR into an M4. Next, I remove the ADAR wooden parts and replace the buffer tube with the Colt A1 buffer tube and add the standard A2 pistol grip, both of these from Peacekeeper. Next, I replace the gas block with the MK12 gas block and then start adding additional parts. First, I have the KAC-QD compensator from Peacekeeper level 2, and then I use the flea market to buy myself the KAC-NT4 suppressor, which is a big boost to the recoil and it keeps your shots quiet. Then I add an MOE-SL handguard from Skier, which needs a pair of M-Lock rails from Mechanic level 2 to add grips and lights. If you don't have Mechanic level 2 yet for the rails, just use the flea market to buy an emergency water ration and trade that to Peacekeeper level 1 for the Daniel Defense handguard and use that instead. After I get the handguard on, I add an RK4 grip from Skier level 2 and an X400 flashlight for my tactical device. For the sight, there's plenty of options, but I like to go for the EOTech holo sights once I have them unlocked, and you can buy either the XPS3 or the 5.53 at Peacekeeper level 2. Finally, the last part here is the Chris DS150 stock, which is available at Peacekeeper level 2 and is surprisingly good for a pretty cheap price. With this build, you're looking at about 60 recoil and close to 40 ergonomics for a total cost somewhere around 120 to 140,000 rubles, depending on what attachments you use and the price you pay for the ADAR. The new recoil system definitely makes full auto tricky on the M4, but this is a pretty well-rounded build considering it only needs level 2 traders. Next up, we have the long-awaited addition of the SCAR, which is kind of surprisingly available at level 2 Peacekeeper, at least in the 5.56 version, though at a pretty high price of around $900 US. To be frank though, I think the price is pretty worth it from my limited experience using it, since it's like an MDR where you only really need to add a handful of parts to get the same stats as a typical M4 build. I wouldn't recommend this if you're strapped for cash, but if you're doing good with your economy, the SCAR is a very fun choice that looks amazing and performs pretty damn well in semi or full auto, even with very limited mods. My SCAR build for this level is basically the same as the M4 since they use a few interchangeable parts, starting with the KAC-QD compensator and the NT4 suppressor used on the ADAR build. Once you add this, you basically just need a grip, light, and sight, and to keep it simple, I'm using the exact parts from the previous build, starting with the RK4 grip, and then the X400 flashlight, and finally one of the EOTech holo sights from Peacekeeper. The SCAR is also a really good choice for something like the compact 2x scope from Jaeger level 2, or really any magnified scope that you can find for a good price on the market or out in the raid as loot. With this build, I end up with 62 recoil and a fairly low ergonomic score of only 23 for about 160 to 170,000 rubles, making it easily the most expensive level 2 trader build, but also the coolest and possibly the most fun to use. I find the SCAR much easier to control in full auto compared to an M4, but the price makes it kind of exclusive. For both of these builds though, I recommend trying to craft M856A1 ammo at the workbench, which is a significant upgrade over the 8.55 that you can buy from the traders. Next up, we have an even more radically simple build with the RFB, yet also one of the most effective in the mid game against the class 4 armor that most players are going to be running at this point. The RFB is by far the best semi-auto 7.62 rifle that you can get early on, and is miles ahead of the Vepr Hunter despite being around the same price at about 50,000 rubles from Skier. The only real problem with the RFB is the M80 round that you want to use in this thing is permanently sold out at Peacekeeper, which is quite annoying, but hopefully that changes very soon. For this build, I'll start with the muzzle device, and first you'll need to add the RFB thread spacer from Skier. For a simple budget-friendly option, I just use the 2A X3 compensator from Mechanic Level 2, or the KAC QD762 compensator from Peacekeeper Level 2. If you want a suppressor, you're going to be relying on the market at this level, and your best option is the SIG SRD suppressor with these little spikes at the front, though it is a bit expensive, coming in at around 50,000 rubles right now. Next, all you need is the RK4 grip for a bit of a recoil buff, and then a sight of your choice. For close range, I recommend an EOTech hollow sight, but you can also run this thing with the 2x scope from Jaeger very well, and if you have it unlocked after doing the Hermit quest for Jaeger on Lighthouse, the TAC 30 in a 30mm mount is awesome on this build, and it turns it into a pretty good jack-of-all-trades DMR. Depending on the mods that you add, this build can be anywhere from 70,000 rubles up to about 120,000 rubles with the suppressor. The ammo is sometimes hard to get, but if you can put it all together, you have a quite powerful build for great ammo. Next up, I've got the classic level 2 Traders AK build, which will work on basically any AK with just one small tweak, but for this one, I'll be showing it on an AK-74N, which I think is one of the best options early on, since you can buy the PP ammo from proper level 2, or you can find BP or BT ammo out in the raid fairly easily. The 74N can be purchased from Proper, it can be bought on the market for a decent price, or quite easily crafted at the workbench using only some weapon parts and the wooden stock and handguard, which can be bought from Proper level 2. After you get one, the first part that I add is the DTK1 compensator, which you can also add to any 7.62 AK using the TT adapter from Skier level 1. Next up is the CAA RS47 handguard, which has rails to attach the RK4 grip and an X400 flashlight. For a sight mount, I have the Bastion dust cover and then an EOTech hollow sight, or really whatever you prefer as a sight, as it's up to your preference. Finally, I replace the pistol grip with the PP19 grip for some extra ergonomics, and then add the GP25 recoil pad for a recoil buff as well. When this is all together on the AK-74N, you get 62 recoil, 50 ergonomics, and a total cost of below 100,000 rubles for the whole build, making this a very cost-effective and reliable setup. To finish off the builds, I just want to quickly go over some SMGs that can do quite well in the early game stages as well, starting with the PP19 and a very cheap suppressed build for it. First, grab a PP19 from Proper, and then search the flea market for the Vitiaz sound suppressor, which is often well below 20,000 rubles for a solid little suppressor. Next, add the RS47 handguard from the AK build, and the same RK4 grip and X400 flashlight that all the other builds are running. For the sight, you can just use a Dovetail Cobra sight, or you can swap to the railed dust cover from Proper level 2 and run a regular Cobra or an EOTech hollow sight, or whatever you prefer. Finally, the last piece is the GP25 recoil pad that fits right onto the default stock. When this is done, you get around 40 recoil, about 50 ergonomics, and again, well below 100,000 rubles for a total price tag, making this a pretty cheap and effective silent questing build. Next up, we have the UMP 45, which has benefited greatly from buffs to the 45 ammo and can be put together as a pretty simple little powerhouse SMG early on with the FMJ ammo. For this build, you only need 3 parts to get started, and surprise surprise, once again it's the RK4 grip, the X400 flashlight, and some kind of sight like an EOTech hollow sight or something similar. That's basically all you need, but if you feel like being fancy, there is an option to suppress this thing right at level 2 Peacekeeper. If you buy the UMP OEM suppressor, this fits right over the default barrel, giving you a pretty good recoil buff and suppressing your shots. The suppressor is a little expensive, but since the gun itself is really cheap, even with a suppressor, you still are only looking at just below 100,000 rubles total for the build. Finally, the last build I want to recommend is the KEDR or the KEDR-B, which I've had sort of a love affair with during this patch specifically. If you're down on your luck, or you just want to farm rubles with a very cheap build that can mow people down at close range and always come back in insurance, the KEDR is a wonderful choice. I mostly use the KEDR-B from Proper level 2 with the built-in suppressor, but you can also get a rail attachment for the normal KEDR that fits a PK06 sight and an X400 flashlight to give your build a little bit more utility. This thing is far from the best gun in the game, but if you get a bunch of 30 round mags loaded with the PST GZH ammo, the KEDR can take people down just from the sheer volume of fire at close range, and the suppressed version is an excellent silent scab killer while you're out there looting. Now that the weapons are done with, let's take a quick look at the armor and equipment available from level 2 traders, and I'll try to keep this brief to avoid dragging out the video too much. First and most importantly, we have body armor, and there's a few pretty solid options right from the traders once they're level 2, specifically from Ragman. The best overall protection here is the 6B3 TM armored rig, which is class 4 armor, repairs fairly well, and has built-in slots for ammo and meds, making it a great one-stop shop for just about 50,000 rubles. The next best in terms of raw protection is the 6B13 armor, which is again class 4, but this thing does not repair well and it's a bit overpriced in my opinion. If you have a good vest to pair this with though, the armor is pretty solid and it's not a bad choice. Next up we have the Cuirass, which is among the best class 3 armors, but it's a little expensive for what it is. There's a barter trade with coffee, milk, and Tarkola from Ragman level 2 as well, and it's not a bad choice, but compared to the 6B3 rig, it's got worse protection for a higher price, but it is a lot lighter. Finally, there's the 6B23 armor from Ragman level 2, which you can also trade from proper level 1 for 1 propane tank, making it a pretty solid budget armor choice, though it is a bit heavy for a class 3 armor and will slow you down a bit. This armor is a solid choice for the price, but overall I would stick with the 6B3 if you can buy it. For helmets, you unlock a few solid options at level 2 traders, but it's kind of up to you whether you want to spend the cash on these. For what it's worth, my actual recommendation for a helmet here is still the 6B47 helmet barter trade from Ragman level 1, just using the flea market to get 2 bottles of bleach and trading them for it for very cheap. However, if you want to be fancy, you can also get the ACH HC helmet from Ragman level 2 or the MICH helmet from Peacekeeper level 2. These two helmets are nearly identical, but the MICH can fit night vision, which is a pretty nice bonus. They're about double the price of the 6B47 barter trade, but they are both a higher armor class, so they might stop bullets that would otherwise go right through the 6B. Finally, I'll just very briefly touch on the backpack selection at Ragman level 2, since some people might have missed the changes last wipe that gave him some pretty awesome bags at level 2. First up, the biggest option that you can easily acquire here is the Switchblade backpack for about 50,000 rubles, giving you 30 spaces for loot, and easily the best backpack you can use at this level, though it is a bit expensive. Next up is the Pillbox bag, which is basically a glorified scab backpack, but it takes up less space than it holds, so you can drop it into a looted scab backpack and gain 4 spaces for more loot. Finally, there's the Gruppa 99 backpack, which is kind of a weird one in my opinion. This bag is new and it has 25 spaces for loot for about 40,000 rubles. For what it's worth, I would spend the extra 10k for the Switchblade, but this thing is a nice middle ground I guess, with a slightly lower price and a few less spaces. That pretty much covers it for everything that I wanted to talk about in this video. It's a lot of information and I tried to condense it down as much as possible while still retaining all the relevant stuff, so I hope it helps you out, and let me know if you have any further questions about this or suggestions down in the comments. I'm still working on leveling up my traders, but there will be a similar video for level 3 loadouts once I have that all available, so stay tuned to the channel if you're interested in some more tips like these. Thanks for checking out the video. I've got links to my Twitch stream, Discord server, and Patreon page down below for anyone interested, and until next time, stay safe in Tarkov City.